Greetings! How's it going? It is I, Frizzle. Major announcement, I am now working on Nebulous Racks full-time. I am no longer at SOE, so yeah, living the dream. Hopefully gonna put Nebracks on Kickstarter and raise funding and all other sorts of fun, cool things. However, we are still currently in a fundraising stage, which means I'm trying to get a fancy tech demo together, which is what you're looking at right now. So as soon as I think this is good enough to, get people to throw money at it, I'll start seeking money. So that's the idea. It's been a couple of months, which is admittedly too long. I should probably be doing these like at least once a month, if not like once every 2 weeks or so, I guess. 2 weeks might be too much. But once a month maybe. And you can see a whole lot of new stuff if you've been keeping track of the video. I guess I'll start out with, should I start with what is the project or should I start with the changes? Let's do a brief overview of the project. The project is called Nebulous Racks. It is going to be basically Dragon Ball meets voxels meets space exploration. And that sounds really ambitious, but I promise it's not as ambitious as it sounds. It's not going to be like, fully featured in-depth space exploration with exploration being like some kind of a key component. It's more like it can be simple, but still kind of consist of those things. And so the worlds aren't necessarily going to be like hugely detailed for you to be obsess over. It's more just like they're going to be randomly generated worlds, and the procedural generation is going to facilitate good content, and the good content is what's going to be the focus, not the infiniteness or the procedural generation. So yeah, the idea is that you'll have superhuman abilities. You'll be able to throw chunks of terrain at things and blow up terrain and shoot Hadoukens and all that kind of stuff. Maybe not shoot Hadoukens, but basically you're going to be, the game I'm currently thinking will star two protagonists, a boy and a girl, who grow up episodically over the course of the game and journey through space. So fun times. It'll have elements of, I guess, magic and spirituality in addition, just kind of like in a, like you would imagine from reading something like, oh my gosh, brain fart, what's it called? I can't remember. It's the book that inspired Dragon Ball, and basically there's I want there to be a kind of, obviously, an Akira Toriyama inspired aesthetic to it. So yeah, that's, I guess, a really brief rundown of the project. But let's talk about the engine itself, since that's the more stable thing, the more guaranteed thing here, and that's what you're probably here for. So you'll notice the fidelity is a lot higher than the last time I ran a video, and probably the most noticeable thing is, or two noticeable things. First, the toon outlining. You'll notice there are black lines around almost everything. Still working on that. It's very touchy. And you'll also notice that there are almost no seams between terrain. And what I've done is I've fixed seams between terrain of the same level of detail, but you'll notice that whenever there's a change in level of detail, so if we go over here, like right up there, you'll see that there is a seam still there, but it's not so bad. You'll also notice there are occasional holes in the ground, which is I've still got to do a little bit of work to fix this stuff. It's not a bug; it's actually expected. It's just if you'll imagine two cubic chunks of terrain adjacent to each other, I have the seam for the two planes of the cube that are adjacent to each other, but I don't have the seam for the edges or the corners, and that's where you'll see these holes. And so that's some more work to be done. I have to change the marching cubes algorithm. The other huge improvement is you'll notice I'm getting a very stable 60 frames per second, and that's because I have highly optimized the terrain system from what it was before. And the gist of that is before I had kind of a polling system. Ooh, we got a hitch there. You still get occasional hitches when you move between chunks, and I'm working on that. But otherwise, the main problem before is that I had a polling system, we shall say. So essentially, in order to load a chunk into the game, it had to be requested, and the game would register that request, and then it would answer it by loading the chunk. And the trouble with that is that in order to keep the chunk in the game, in the cache, it had to be continually requested, and that's a lot of unnecessary work, as opposed to putting in one request every time you need it. And so I changed it to a non-polling method, which seems intuitive, but I guess I was trying to be clever at the time, which is silly. But I didn't put a lot of effort in, like, the polling method I got to reuse most of my code because I think I did a good job writing it. No, I'll just be arrogant and say that. But I got to reuse most of it, and I still have the old rendering method available. I'm just not using it, and that's something I'm currently pretty proud of with my code base, is that I haven't wasted any work really, and I might still be using that for other things. What I have is I can swap between whatever rendering methods I need to, more or less. It's very general. And what I might be doing, you'll notice that there aren't currently any voxel bodies, and I still have to re-add those back with the new terrain system. And well, before I get into that, let's talk about what the new representation is. The new representation is essentially a 3D clip map. If you're a programmer, you might know what a clip map is, maybe. But normally a clip map is a two-dimensional object. It's a grid, like a circular array, but two-dimensional, basically, so that when you're moving around, parts of the array get unloaded and then new things get loaded in their place, and it kind of uses this modular arithmetic to figure out what that 2D array is representing at any time. So as I move around, there's basically a giant three-dimensional grid of chunks, and as I move right, the chunks this way get unloaded and chunks this way get loaded, but they're filling the place of those old chunks in the 3D grid. Hopefully that makes some sense to non-technical people. Yeah, and so that's a fairly complicated data structure. Pretty intuitive if you think about it. And so that's kind of what I'm using to both store the chunks in memory and to store the vertex meshes in a allotted way. The thing is that a clip map is traditionally not just one level of detail, but many levels of detail, and that's some of where the complexity comes from. And so you have multiple 3D grids kind of on top of each other. Kind of crazy if you think about it. So yeah, there's a lot of other stuff here, so let's go ahead and get on that. I'm really proud of the performance increase, though, and that was a lot of work. You'll notice if you see little bits sparkling, that's something that needs to be fixed. That's it's complicated, but I basically just need to add a little feature and it'll be done. Sorry, it's still in there. But let's see, tune outlining, we've kind of gone over it. You'll notice that everything looks kind of toony. There are black lines around most everything. It is not perfect, and I'm not sure if it's that noticeable because my eyes are so acclimated to it. You'll notice that not everything gets the black outline, and in some places it looks a little rough. So there's still some work to be done on it, but I think it's come a long way, and I think it looks pretty good. Yeah. You'll notice, let's go ahead and talk about animations and modeling. So that's a huge thing I've been working on. You might have noticed the, frame hitch. Okay, I think Fraps has decided to suddenly swap to 30. I've set Fraps to 30 FPS, and normally when I do that, Fraps will actually go down to 30 FPS for the whole video, but this time it's not, so I don't know what's going on. Yeah, so let's talk about the models and animation. Woo! Yeah. Uh-oh. These guys are all the same. Let's, here we go. Yeah, so you'll notice a couple of things here. Let me turn something off. So these guys are animated Bezier curves, and you'll notice they have eyes. Those eyes are post-projective decals. Those are projected in screen space onto the models. And what's really fancy about this is that those they're screen space projected decals, but they're also normalized to the Bezier curve. So as the Bezier curve animates, those components animate along with it. And what I have so far is a basic component system. I'm still kind of fleshing it out, but you can see it's more or less working. And I have a representation in YAML. YAML ain't a markup language is the abbreviation for that. Just a very simplified version of XML, so I can actually import and export these things from different applications. And I'm planning, and currently still believe I'm able to make some a way to import-export these with Blender, and that's going to be a fair bit of work. I've already spent some time just researching Blender and getting acclimated to that, but Blender definitely seems like it's going to be the tool to work for me. Yeah, so we got animated Bezier curves. I think these guys are pretty cute. The light's kind of weird over here, so their eyes look almost kind of red and satanic. So maybe that's not what I was going for, just maybe. Maybe a little less bright over here. Yeah. This is a little bit more what they look like normally. Yeah, so these things are fancy. I'm really proud of them. Maybe, I don't know if to someone who doesn't understand what they are, if they look that amazing, but, you know, I think they show off the physically based rendering very well because they're moving like that. And they also just, I think the eyes look pretty cute, if I say so myself. They're pretty cute, you know. Okay, other things. So, let's see. let's talk about the just some more rendering stuff. So you'll notice that the terrain itself looks a bit more fancy. You'll also notice these lines everywhere. The lines are an artifact of the texturing, not a rendering artifact, and that's just something that I don't really have the time to I don't have the time to fix a whole texture thing right now. But that's an artifact of the textures itself, not the system. But basically you'll see that the lighting is basically these things are now bump mapped, and so the textures are themselves are kind of lit in a way. And so this thing above me, if you might have seen it before, is a light. Let me place this up here. Maybe that'll help see. So if I go this way, you'll notice that the terrain definitely appears to be kind of three-dimensional, and it's not very high res, but you can see that like as you look at it at an oblique angle, you can kind of make out how the light differentiates. I think I can find a better example of what I'm talking about if I move around. Maybe here? I'm looking for a giant stone surface, essentially. Like just a big stone wall. They're normally everywhere. Here we go. The light's above my head. And we're just going to put it like right next to the wall like this. Yeah, so you can see. Ooh, fancy. Yeah, and so that was a fair bit of work adding bump mapping, and I think it's turned out pretty well. The texturing itself looks pretty janky because I had to generate a bump map for a texture that is not designed to be bump mapped. This is using is it Misha's texture pack? Oh, I forget now. Misha. I'm gonna feel terrible. I'll look it up and put it in the video description. But I believe I'm using Misha's texture pack, which is a Minecraft texture pack that's high res and very awesome. And I used it for my Minecraft mod. I highly recommend you check that out if you play Minecraft. It's pretty awesome. If you don't think my engine looks awesome with it, then maybe screw you. But I recommend it. So we've got normal mapping. Let's talk about some more post effects. So a big one that you might have noticed that's pretty crazy is the clouds. So clouds. These are pretty. So essentially what I did was I looked up a pretty standard cloud rendering method on the GPU. The thing is that it was normally pretty dang slow. However, I was able to reduce the level of noise with it so they look a little bit more round and cutesy, if you will, which actually fits with my art style very well. It's not rendering around the whole world, but you can see this slice of clouds here. And so I think this looks really good for what it is. And I might actually run with this. The thing is, the only caveat is that this doesn't run particularly well on older generation graphics cards. So that means that I need to either make it optional and live with it, or provide an alternative on lower end graphics cards, or just nuke it entirely. But I really like this rendering method, and I hope I can keep some variant of it and keep it fast. Because on my GTX 570, it wasn't running perfectly, although it was acceptable. But on my GTX 970, it's running just fine. So let's see. You've already seen the Bezier curves if you've seen older videos. I mean, you just saw them animating in a different way than these are. These are hard-coded in the way they're swirling around. They're not like, these aren't represented with models and components. They're just hard-coded math. Whereas the ones I showed you earlier are actual models that can be input to the program and everything, and are more generic and more flexible. Woo! Yeah. Ooh, what else? Let's talk about bloom. Oh, I had it disabled for a while, but yeah, I think I had bloom in the last video, but I've had some opportunity to tune it and change it. It's possible to implement bloom in a way that, so basically the way I currently have bloom is that whenever light goes above a certain threshold, it starts to blur. However, it's possible to implement it so that all light blurs, but just by the natural nature of the algorithm, brighter lights tend to blur more. However, I couldn't get that to work without everything looking too blurry, so I still need to investigate that, but I just don't have the time. Yeah, bloom. Another big thing is screen space ambient occlusion. I'm actually using a variant called screen space ambient obscurance. This is new in this video, that, like the whole algorithm is, that was used in Guitar Hero 2. And let's take a look at it. So that's what it looks like without it. Let me, I can change the textures on the bottom left of the screen. So let's take a look at screen space obscurance. Here we go. Ambient occlusion final. It's currently off. I turn it on and then I blur it, and that's what it looks like if you look at the bottom left of the screen. And it just gives everything like a real amount of depth, especially in a voxel engine like this. It helps a lot. Before I added the normal mapping and the toon outlining, it was really noticeable, and it just made everything look beautiful. I still think it makes everything look pretty gorgeous, but so that's the difference. Let's see. You know, at a distance it kind of wears down, but when you're close it looks particularly good. So yeah, that's what it looks like without. It looks pretty flat, but when you have it, it looks, everything just has a lot more depth. Now, SSAO is something that is often not implemented well, and I still have to see more use cases of mine to make sure mine doesn't fall into that category. Like you can see it here, this little shadow down here is totally from screen space ambient occlusion, which is pretty awesome. But oftentimes it's almost too artificial looking, which is normally a product of doing it a little bit too much in screen space, so to speak, and it'll just look really artificial. Like every time there's like a change in the continuity of a surface, it'll just look black, which looks terrible. And hopefully mine does not look quite that bad. Moving on, let's show you. Let me turn off bloom because it's pretty distracting, especially with all this, because there's lights here. If you'll see them moving around, that kind of brighten up these Bezier curves, and that kind of distracts. But let's take a look at, I think, light scattering. No, that's not light scattering. Light scattering. Haha. Now, it might interact with the clouds poorly, so I just turn clouds off. Where are you, light scattering? Ah, there it is. So that doesn't look particularly cool until you can see it kind of moving around the terrain. It's a pretty small radius right now. I haven't changed it, but you can see it kind of like, imagine that filling up the whole screen instead of a tiny little circle. You'll get what I mean. And there's another way of implementing it, and I'm probably going to do it, but regardless, this is nice to show off because, you know, in a game with giant spirit energy blasts, having god rays like this can be really useful for making those energy blasts feel like they are emitting light everywhere, especially in a really anime kind of way, which is what I'm going for. And so, you know, every time somebody's charging a spirit bomb, he'll have one of these things going off, which will be pretty epic. It'll look kind of like going around. It'll look like it's just kind of projecting around every surface. This needs a lot of work, to be honest, so. It does look kind of like a spirit bomb if you think about it. Just throwing it out there, but probably not going to add that specifically. What else? Font rendering. That's a huge deal. If you look at the debug screen, all this font that's on the screen right now, this is no longer rendered in a really ghetto way. This is no longer rendered with just bitmaps that aren't blurred and like Minecrafty looking textures. This is rendering. I'm actually rendering Microsoft Consolis right now, which is a programmer font, like an actual true type font that you can just, like, I can import any font into the game right now if I want to. Almost any true type font, not open type. So if I want to render, like, I was actually thinking of rendering a font called, I think it was Anime Ace. That's like the standard comic book font for anime. Like they use that in Dragon Ball, I believe. And so I can actually, I've tried it and it looks pretty cool, but I can actually use that for font in my game now, which is pretty wicked awesome. So I could go for a really hardcore manga style if I want to, with, you know, speech bubbles filled with anime text and such, and it'll be really nice. I'm using SDB font. What is it? SDB TrueType for that. SDB is a great set of libraries. There's actually a SDB voxel that just came out. It's pretty cool. They do cube-based voxel rendering, so you should check that out if you're a programmer. It is some really useful and just cool stuff, and that guy did a great job implementing it. So go check that out. What else? Let me show you a real quick thing. Let's keep moving through here. I had, oh, there it was. Luminance in the bottom left of the screen. So if I stare at a really bright light, let me turn bloom back on, you'll see that the luminance right there goes up. And this is something I was really experimenting with, which is this thing was actually rendered, that luminance texture at the bottom was blitted across the entire screen and used to darken and lighten individual areas of the screen like your eyes actually would in real life. And I'm still working on it. Like sometimes it works really well and just makes the whole scene darken in a way that feels really organic. Other times it's just annoying as crap and it doesn't really simulate necessarily what you want it to. The problem is it's almost kind of like it's simulating an effect that actually happens inside of your eyes. The trouble is that your eyes are already kind of doing that. You know, that's what bloom is as well. Bloom doesn't really happen so much when you're looking at a monitor, but it tricks your eyes well enough into having that luminance effect that's happening that I was trying to emulate. So there might not necessarily be a point in me doing like a a local small scale form of luminance adjusting, I guess. But yeah, that was a cool thing I spent some time on. What else is there? There's so much to talk about, like, because I've been working on this for 3 months and full time, so there's just a heck, there's a heck of a lot of stuff. Um, let's see. I have a list of stuff that I put together. Let me pause the video real quick and look at that. All right, so there wasn't. We've actually covered almost everything, possibly almost too quickly. Although there's so much that this video is probably going to be really long. I don't know. But we're going to go over a few more things. One thing that I'm particularly proud of, if you're looking at this crazy thing right now, is I implemented Irradiance maps using spherical harmonics. And that sounds so academic and jargony, I don't even know where to begin. But basically, it is ambient light. Light that's not coming from one directional light source, but is global in a way. And so you can see here where there's not much light filling in, this thing is got a whole bunch of colors all over it. And what I did in between... so I restarted the application and I changed the environment lighting to basically be green, red, and blue depending on the orientation you're looking at it from. So that's why it looks like this. And so this is just to show off that I can basically have actual environment lighting like you'd have in a, like, this is a really AAA kind of thing. And so like up here, this is green looking at it this way, and this is blue, and over this way is, or that's red because I don't know my colors. That's red, and that's blue. And so what's really cool about this is I'll actually be able to give things a really artistic and deep look. So like if you're out and let's say a moonlit night like this, I could give everything a blue tint. And the spherical harmonics would capture that. What they were before I did this was basically just a flat light, so it was consistent all around. So I kind of want to explain it because I think it's really cool. Spherical harmonics are basically a form of compression. And it is a function over the surface of a sphere. And so essentially with 27 floating point variables, I'm able to represent a very blurry image over the course of an entire sphere. It's RGB. And essentially you take the normal of a surface, see where it's looking at, and sample that spherical harmonic function, and you get the color that you stored. And so you're able to compress just any blurry scene that you want to in 27 variables, which is I find to be pretty fascinating, and I'm trying to think of really cool applications to use that in, because 27 variables is nothing. That's like, there are actually some methods that actual graphics programmers use that store spherical harmonics at every single vertex of a model. That stores an entire environment's worth of irradiance. So just to give you an idea of how good of compression this is, the actual paper that they released this algorithm on has like 500 citations or something ridiculous like that. Yeah, so that's pretty awesome, and I'm in love with that algorithm, to say the least. What else? I wanted to mention that with the font rendering, I also have sign distance fields, which is Valve's standard way of rendering fonts mostly in the world, not like in an actual UI. I think the method I have here using SDB is much better for UI, because when I tried using the sign distance fields for that, it never turned out well. And maybe I just need to fiddle with it more, but for the most part, it looked kind of janky. To explain, sign distance fields are basically, instead of representing font with a texture that's just like, this is what every character looks like, it actually represents every pixel. Every pixel stores a distance from the actual glyph, the actual texture. So you're able to basically use that information to very quickly create bold fonts, italic fonts, shadowed fonts, just all kinds of neat effects. And so that's why I have that, and I'll be able to use that for anything that's in world space, which is pretty cool. What else? Now, there's just a couple little things and some stuff to talk about with marching cubes. Little things include tone mapping. I'm using the Uncharted 2 tone mapping method. It's pretty dang subtle, and I can't really, it just makes everything look slightly different and more cinematic in a way. And vignetting, you'll notice if you look at the, let me turn off the debug screen real quick. I should have done that. So if you look at the top left, top right, bottom left, and bottom right corners of the screen, you'll notice that there's just kind of like this circular darkening around the edges. If you play a game like FF15, the preview that came out, you'll notice that the vignetting is really over the top and kind of annoying almost in my opinion. But I decided to try some vignetting in my game, and I think it looks pretty good when it's done modestly. And it just gives it more, I guess, a smooth, nice cinematic look, if you will. Cinematic. I hate that word. Going back, I guess the last thing to really go over before we talk about marching cubes a little bit more is FXAA. I'm going to turn it on, and you're not going to see any visible difference because, I mean, in the background it kind of blurs things a little bit excessively, but FXAA is not the best anti-aliasing algorithm. I've been stressing over it to be totally sure I've implemented it correctly, and I'm pretty sure at this point that it is, but honestly, who knows? Because FXAA doesn't even look perfect when it's implemented correctly, but I'm pretty sure I have it right. I also have SMAA or SLAA, I forget, mostly implemented. I should finish that and see if that looks any better and show it off next time by the next video that it's ready for. Hopefully that's much better. I really need to finish that. Yeah, so the last thing to talk about is marching cubes. It is to talk about that a little bit more since the last video. Basically, the last video I had some errors with it that maybe weren't so obvious to someone who had never done marching cubes before, aka myself, and now those are fixed. And so the two things that are major that were fixed were essentially before. So the close-up terrain basically looks the same, but for terrain that's further away, if I grab the light so we can see, is no longer so. The transitions are no longer so hard. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. That's a good view. And so it's now much smoother every time that there's a difference in how do I explain this? So you'll notice that with the LOD 0 terrain, the level of detail 0 terrain, that every single change in surface orientation is very sharp and consistent. Whereas with the lower level of detail, it's a little bit smoothed out to where the toon outlining doesn't even necessarily capture every curve. It's a little less consistent. It's a little bit more, it's not like every 45-degree angle looks the same. Now there's like 35-degree angles and 76-degree angles and whatever, depending on what the underlying terrain is. That's how I will explain that in layman's terms. And so that was a major fix for terrain that's further away. I'm still, the toon outlining doesn't necessarily look perfect with it. So I've just got a lot of aesthetic work to do to really flesh that stuff out. And the other major issue is that I wasn't mapping every vertex to the correct texture in a consistent and good way, and now I am. So before it wasn't necessarily picking the right texture, it was only a glitch if it was. Now it is picking the right texture for every surface. It should pick stone or dirt, there's no dirt, or grass correctly now, based on the right direction. And the last thing I'll say about marching cubes is that the terrain is entirely meshed on the CPU now. And that is actually faster in terms of rendering than trying to do it with a GPU, because geometry shaders are slow, as I've come to find out. Now, I was kind of touting those and bragging about it a little bit with my very first videos, and what I found is that geometry shaders work a heck of a lot better when there's not much data to be submitting as vertex attributes with your vertices. So if your meshes don't have a lot of data to them, then geometry shaders work great because they compress your data in a really immense way. Sorry, this is really technical, but and now that I have a lot of data, not a lot, but significant data with every single vertex, and I'm using deferred rendering instead of normal rendering, instead of forward rendering, shall we say, I've found that the geometry shader is not working as quickly as it did before. So that's no longer, I think, a viable option. Although, I mean, I still have it implemented, so I can always experiment and see maybe the maybe GPU resources shift around so that it does become viable. I don't know, but it's not viable right now. I feel like there should be much more to talk about, and I'm like almost 100% certain that I'm missing some things, but I think I've covered just about everything I need to. So yeah. Oh, one last thing. I am updating Hack/Mine almost every weekend. I've been kind of ill these past 2 weeks, like really ill, and I'm just now getting better enough that I was like, I can finally make this video and not be boring as crap. But yeah, I've been streaming updates for Hack/Mine on my Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/Frizzle, Frizzil. you should totally check that out if you're interested in my Minecraft mod and you want to support me in actually getting that done, because holy crap, it's taking forever. Otherwise, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel to keep up with Nebulous Racks updates and other ongoing things with my life. I seriously need to post some music. I keep saying I'm going to do that, and then for some reason I just keep avoiding it. I guess because right now getting a tech demo for raising money is a lot more important than trying to get the music, although the music will definitely be a big component with that. So I need to definitely get some music out there because I've written so much of it and I just need to freaking make videos of it, and oh my gosh. So that needs to happen. So subscribe to the YouTube channel if you want to see any of that stuff and potentially some Hack/Mine related things, which I'm sure there will be more of. Although right now the Twitch streams are not being uploaded to YouTube because I just don't think they're good as archives. I think Twitch streams, or at least my Twitch streams, are better watched if you're just there when I'm streaming them so you can interact with me, as opposed to watching an archive of it. I don't think it's that immensely amazing. So yeah, like, subscribe, all that stuff. I post updates on Hack/Mine to the Minecraft forums on the official Hack/Mine thread. So I tend to let everyone know when I can't do a video, or if I'm going to do a video at a different time, which is most of the time. It'll usually be Saturday, like around 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever. So yeah, stay tuned to all those places. And I will try to get a Nebulous Racks video out, hopefully every 2 weeks or once a month. That should be my goal, and I also need to get some music out. So yeah, thanks for watching, thanks for the support. See you guys later.